Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I get to ask my stupid questions to some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency services. My guest this week has over 50 years in the fire service, 27 of those years being with the FDNY, primarily in Special Operations Command. He retired in 2007 as Deputy Assistant Chief of Special Operations Command. He was a search and rescue manager at Ground Zero following the attacks of 9/11 and held a key role in rebuilding the department in the following years. He's the author of the Fire Officer's Handbook of Tactics, and he has written extensively for the fire service magazines. Additionally, he lectures nationally on a wide variety of fire and rescue topics. It's my pleasure to welcome Chief John Norman. Chief, welcome.
Morning, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's an honor. So, as is the format of the show, we open up the show with the wheel of stupid questions. This is just a reminder that asking dumb questions can be good. If you point them at the right people, you can get some pretty smart answers despite what the question might be. So, with that, we'll hop right into it and see what we get today. Okay, let's spin the wheel and we'll see what we get today. Before we got into this, Chief Norman told me that there's no stupid questions, but we're gonna test that. Okay, this is a pretty dumb one. It's a long question, so bear with me. What movie or song do you love that everybody else seems to hate, or do you hate that everybody else seems to love?
Movie or song? Well, one of my favorite movies is called Secondhand Lions, and it never went anywhere. Exactly. See the look on your face? Yeah. But it is about two old timers, and Michael Caine, and another great actor, Robert Duvall.
Oh, wow.
And they live an eccentric existence that I could just see myself in. I'm at that stage in life where they were portraying that I'm like, you don't really care what a lot of other people think about. You know? So, yeah. And it's really, like I said, it never really went anywhere. It wasn't, box office hit or anything like that, but I love it.
You love it. That's fun. I wrote it down. I'm going to have to check it out. I'm interested.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
Okay. Well, let's hop into it. The real deal here. As is one of the things I always ask my guests is, what's the origin story? Why did you choose the fire service?
I grew up in the fire service. My father was a volunteer chief out on Long Island where we lived. He was a dispatcher on weekends, and we lived right around the corner. So my mother would send my brother and I over with lunch and dinner for him, and we would wait while he was eating and bring the plate back. So in the meantime, we would play on fire trucks. And, we started out, they had an active junior firefighter program. So I was in the firehouse, a lot growing up and around. These guys were all World War II veterans. These were some tough, admirable people. You looked at these guys and you're in awe of so many of them. And I said, man, I want to be like those guys, And growing up in that organization, it was called the Inwood Fire Department, as I said, and it's right on the border with New York City. A lot of the members were also New York City firefighters. And I remember my first night going to visit one of the guys, again, one of my idols, a fellow named Joe Ball. He was in a very busy Brooklyn engine company, and he took me in to work with him one night while I was in high school. And I was like, man, this is just the greatest thing since sliced bread. I couldn't wait to get on the job. So that was, I was almost born to be a firefighter.
You said you had a brother. Do any of the other members of your family join the fire service?
Well, they were all volunteers. I had three brothers, all of which became volunteer firefighters. And still to this day, most of them are, practicing. My nephews are all active volunteers, but none of them became career firefighters. My children became career firefighters. Two of my brothers were New York City police officers. They became New York City cops. Some really serious units. My brother Dave was in emergency services for 20 years. He was actually in the World Trade Center the North Tower shortly after the planes struck, and he was one of the last people out of the North Tower before it collapsed.
Wow.
We were very heavily involved, to this day. Like I say, one of my nephews is in emergency services in the NYPD in Truck 1 where my brother was. So it's, continuing tradition.
A family business.
Yeah.
So what year would that have been that you first started going to fires?
I started, my father took me to my first fire that I can remember. I had to be, 6, 7 years old.
Oh, wow.
So like 1959.
Wow.
My community that I grew up in, New York State decided to build a highway right through the middle of it. So they bought up all these houses and were knocking them down. But before they knocked them down, they sat vacant for months on end in some cases, and they became targets for the arsonist match. So that was my first fire that I can recall. And it looked like the whole world was on fire. This big old frame house, actually it was probably a 3 or 4 family house on fire. The trees on fire around it. I mean, it was just looked like the end of the world. So that was the first fire I went to. And then as soon as I could, I was old enough to chase fires on bicycle. I remember I was never allowed to go past this one street, Lawrence Avenue, and the fire whistle blow, and it sounds like a working fire, blows again. The neighboring communities' alarms are sounding, and I look up and there's this massive cloud of smoke. So I ride my bike up to it, and it was a massive bowling alley fire. And it was the first bowstring truss roof collapse that I actually witnessed. And they had guys from my community up on that roof, and they ran for their lives, ran off the roof, and, fell probably 15 feet. But it collapsed underneath several of them. Nobody went in, thank God. It started at the other end from where they were working. So, I've been chasing fires, right? To this day, I still, if there's a fire, I'm going by. I'll take pictures I use in my training classes and so on. But
do you remember the first fire you actually worked on?
Oh,
Were you actually hands-on?
Yeah, that was, and it was pretty dramatic. And I was in the fire department for maybe 2 weeks. I used to work for a fire equipment distributor, recharging extinguishers and stuff like that in high school. And July of 1970, I had just gotten into the fire department a couple of weeks earlier, and alarm comes in for a house fire, and it's between my shop where we worked and the other guys in the shops were all volunteers, and we roll out of there and come up the side street, and the house is right there in front of us, and it's 2.5 story wood frame but stucco covered, and it is heavy fire. And I get there, and there's a woman on fire running out of the front door, and she's screaming, "My husband is in there, my husband's in there." So I run down to the corner and meet the first 2 engineers coming down the block, get gear on there, and I get we get to the front door. I'm still getting dressed while the guys who are already on the rig, who came from quarters, they're already dressed. And the officer on the hose line was a fellow named John Ball. John Ball was a legendary tough guy fireman in New York City. He was up in Brooklyn as well, 216 engine. And he's in charge of the first hose line. He's not an inward officer. He had been, but he's out as an officer there, but he's the senior guy. And so he's in command. And he just get a mask on and get upstairs and get the husband. So I go upstairs, and I'm really by myself at that point, which, I'm 2 weeks in the fire department, going upstairs to make a search. But he's leading the hose line, and it's a cellar fire. It turns into a disaster. I get upstairs. I remember the search very, very clearly. I had been training and watching fires for years and listening to these guys. But now here it's my first time to do it. And I go in and I get their first bedroom on the right at the top of the stairs. That door was open, so it had a pretty heavy smoke condition. And the next door I go into, and that door had been closed, so I went through that pretty quick. I remember coming to a third doorway, and I look, and I have a light, big hand light with me, and shine it in, and I would swear to this day that what I saw was a closet. A wall on the left, a wall on the right, and a wall straight ahead of me, 2 feet in. It wasn't. The light hit the smoke, reflected back in my face, and it looked like a wall. I go on, continue to search. I don't find the husband. I miss him. Come downstairs because I'm running out of air now. We were using, at that point, we had the 15-minute, what we call sling packs in the jump seats. And now I'm out of air. So I'm on my way down, and I tell the next two guys who I meet coming down while they're going up, I tell them, go to the left. There's one room to the left that I haven't gotten. And we don't find the guy. Turns out he jumped out the back window and was running around the building as we came into the block, but I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. So afterwards, the fire gets knocked down. I mean, it's a mess. There were firemen not trapped, but my lieutenant, he had the old Scott 1 or 2 mask with the breathing tube that came down to the regulator. Well, a piece of wire, red hot wire, again, it had been a cellar fire with gasoline stored in the cellar. It was, anything that could go wrong did. Well, that piece of wire was hanging down, and it melted through his breathing tube. So now he's sucking in heavy smoke. He goes down, and it becomes a firefighter rescue effort. And this is my first fire. I mean, he ended up in the hospital for about a week with smoke inhalation. People on fire, people jumping out of windows, and firemen trapped, and I ended up getting a new mask. We're leaving on a 2.5-inch line to go down the cellar, and so it made a dramatic impression. I'll never forget that fire. But afterwards, they send me back upstairs to check for tools, and I go back up to where I had searched, and I look into what I had thought was a closet, and it was actually a hallway that led to 2 more bedrooms that I had missed entirely. So, it was a great lesson there. Don't ever trust your eyes. Always verify with feel. Mm-hmm. It was, I say, for a first fire, that was pretty dramatic.
Yeah. How have, at that point, right? I think the vast majority of the fire service would say that fires now, especially like residential fires, are pretty formulaic. It's like, we do this, primary line, backup line, primary search, secondary search. What were tactics like in 1970? Was it formulaic like that, or was it kind of like Wild West?
Well, there was less formality to it, but I mean, we did the same basic things. I mean, and everybody knew that. Okay, first line's going to the seat of the fire, second line's going through the front door to back it up. That was our SOP. Mm-hmm. Certainly in New York City, things were a lot more formalized. They had Ladders 3, one of their initial training bullets, teaching you or telling you how to fight fires and where your positioning is and what tools to bring with you. I mean, that goes back into the 1960s. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, by 1970, things were pretty formalized in New York. And we being so close to New York, with so many of the FDNY members, I mean, we emulated their tactics.
What year did SCBAs start coming around? Like there has to be pretty early on, right? Because you're probably still in like, 3/4 boots and stuff like that. Yeah. So like that era was a lot of transition in tactics, right? Or a little bit earlier.
We had, by 1970, I mean, in the 60s, they had masks. Mm-hmm. That was a product really of World War II. So, and before that, like when my father joined in 1946, they had the old canister masks, the filter masks, but very few SCBA. But again, during the war, Scott Aviation, the Scott mask came from Scott Aviation. During World War II, they made masks, self-contained breathing apparatus for bomber crews who were flying over 15,000 feet high, so that the crew could disconnect from compressed air and move from position to position. And that's where that all came from. The innovation came from.
Was there a lot of resistance from, say, like the old timers at that point? Like when you came into the fire service, the people that were kind of in the twilight of their career, did they not want to adopt these new technologies?
Yeah, everybody has resistance to what's new to them. There were people who, I remember going through what we called pepper tests in the cellar of the firehouse in Inwood, and some of the really tough guys would take you down in the cellar and they'd put a cast iron skillet on a stove and pour pepper and hot pepper and stuff into that and create a smoke condition, and the last guy out won. And the first guy out was, everybody made fun of them. So, teaching you how to breathe smoke, but it did have some valuable lessons. I mean, of course, it probably, shortened some guys' careers or lives, but we'd burn everything from old mop heads. But it taught you how to get low and stay below the smoke and, find the air that was at the bottom of the room. And that was a valuable technique, because I've run out of air in places where you didn't want to run out of air. Mm-hmm. But now being able to get your nose down on the floor and what we used to call sucking the nails out of the floorboards was okay. Last ditch survival effort.
So as you transition from your volunteer time to getting onto FDNY, what was that hiring process, the academy process like at that point?
Well, I came back from college in 73, and I had just missed the 73 exam. You have to have filed like a year or 6 months prior to the examination, and nobody told me about the exam. So I had to sit and wait. And I was anxious. We had a maximum age limit of 28 years old. And now I'm starting to, it's 1977 when they give the exam. So I'm 25 already. And the list runs for 4 years. And that's my last exam. If I don't make that test, I'm not going to get hired. Mm-hmm. So I was waiting anxiously. I was working as a sprinkler engineer, designing fire sprinkler systems and standpipe systems and stuff in New York City. I was all over the 5 boroughs. I was, as I'm driving through the city, if I saw a fire, I would go, chase it. And I was working in a lot of the neighborhoods that like Williamsburg. I worked a lot in Williamsburg, which was a very busy fire area. So I wanted to get hired, but there was no guarantees. The only guarantee you have is to work hard, study, get in shape for the physical exam, and do the best you can. Mm-hmm. So they gave the exam in December of 77. And I didn't get hired until October of 79. So I was at the cusp, 27 years old. I was, okay, this is my last chance here. So it was kind of, nervous.
I would imagine so, yeah. So as you go through the academy then, where do you land, and then how do you end up in Special Operations Command?
Well, I went through the academy October of 79, October and November of 79, and actually had some friends. I was an instructor already at that point at the Nassau County Fire Academy out on Long Island. And one of the instructors at the New York City Fire Academy was also an instructor out at Bethpage at the Nassau Fire Academy with me. And we had worked together. And now he and several of the other folks in Inwood are telling me, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. We're going to get you up to at that time, it was the 3-4 Battalion, Engine 209. Great company where a couple of other guys in the neighborhood worked. And I was like, I'm in. Count me in, coach. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea how I ended up going to 290 engine. I went to the other end of Brooklyn, South Brooklyn, the southern part of Brooklyn. And I was surprised. I mean, I thought I was going to 209. And when the order came down and it says 290, I was like, I have no idea where it is. Well, it's the busiest engine in New York City. It's been the busiest engine in the top 5 engines for the last 50 years, or more than since the early 60s. So I don't know how it happened, but it was a blessing to me that it did. Like I say, I would have wanted to transfer there if I had known about it, but I got assigned there out of Proby School.
Wow.
And the way I ended up going to Special Operations is because I did go to 290. One of the lieutenants that worked in Engine 290 had been a firefighter in Rescue 1. And we became good friends. He was an absolute spectacular officer, a great leader, great teacher, and his name was Steve Cassani. And Steve took a liking to me. We had done a couple of things together that he said, well, this guy's got some talent. And when he transferred to Rescue 3, a short time later, they had an opening for a firefighter, and he was able to talk to the captain and say, I got a guy that you would really want. So Steve brought me into Rescue 3, and hence my entire career. Later on, he stayed as a lieutenant, and he ended up transferring to Rescue 1. And when I became the captain of Rescue 1, Steve was one of my lieutenants. So we went full circle.
Wow.
So, yeah, he was a great, great guy. Now, and the whole issue of like transferring and promotions and all, you move whenever you get promoted. But because I had worked in Rescue 3, I worked with several officers who had been firefighters in Rescue Company 2 and gotten promoted. 3 lieutenants there. Pete Lund was a good friend of mine. We used to be carpool buddies when I was in 290. He had worked in Ladder 120, a neighboring company. So we carpooled together. And then he went to Rescue 2, worked for the legendary Captain Ray Downey. Gets promoted out of Rescue 2, ends up as a lieutenant in Rescue 3. Marty McTeague had been a firefighter in Rescue 2 for Downey, and he was one of the lieutenants in Rescue 3 also. And then Paul McFadden had been a lieutenant in Rescue 3, and he actually transferred to Rescue 2 while still working now while Downey's the captain. So when they had an opening for a lieutenant, those 3 fellows spoke up for me and said, hey, he'll be a good officer in Rescue 2. So all that continually played out throughout my career. When Downey got promoted, he became the chief of rescue operations at the time. I got promoted to captain, and there was a vacancy in Rescue 1 for captain, and Downey recommended me to the chief of department and said, he's the guy I want to put in Rescue 1. Mm-hmm. So those, interactions, mentoring, if you will, that your reputation precedes you. So you've got to protect your reputation, create your, own luck, if you will, by doing good things.
How long were you working before you eventually promoted to chief?
Let's see. 79 to 87. I had about a little over 7 years as a fireman. I was a lieutenant from 87 to 93, so 6, that's 13. And then from 94 to 2000, 99. 90. So yeah, I had 20 years before I made chief.
What was that decision like to leave Rescue 1? I have to imagine that was a hard choice.
Yeah, that was a very hard choice. I had taken the test for battalion chief before I had gotten assigned. I tell people, it was out of self-defense. The department can put you anywhere where they want you. And there's not much you can do about it. I mean, you can ask for a transfer, but they don't like transferring officers out of, companies where they want them. So the way to make sure you don't get stuck in a bad company is you can retire, you can die, or you can get promoted. So I took the test to make sure that if I did find myself working someplace I really didn't want to be, I had an option. But now I am the captain of Rescue 1, and it was, I didn't do great on the battalion chief's test. I didn't want the job that much. I took it, like I said, out of self-defense as an option. But now I am in a great spot. I'm loving it. So I had talked about turning it down. And Deputy Chief Vinnie Dunn was another mentor of mine. He was the commander of the 3rd Division in Midtown Manhattan, where Rescue 1 is located. And we became friends. And he came to visit me one night. He said, "John, I'm hearing bad things." I said, "What's that, Chief? We got a problem with the company? What is it?" He says, "No, I'm hearing you're going to turn down the chief's list." And I'm like, "Well, I'm thinking about it." He says, "You can't do that. You can't do that. The job needs good officers. They need good chiefs. They need leaders all the way up the ranks. If a guy like you turns down the test, somebody else is going to take it. And it might be somebody that doesn't have your background, doesn't have your experience. And now, who do you want, leading you into a fire? Who do you want commanding that fire? A guy who's been there and done that? Or do you want somebody who's just a test taker?" Wow. Okay. So he kind of guilted me into it. And which I understand now. I agree. Later on, when I was chief of special operations, I had the same issue. We have guys who didn't want to take the deputies test. Great battalion chiefs. They didn't want to take the deputies test. How do you think we're going to get good staff officers? Good deputy chiefs. If the good guys don't take the test, somebody else is going to. So it's an ongoing problem. Anytime you have people working in great assignments, they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
But we need it for the good of the job.
Yeah. It's I think that's always constantly an issue, right? It's like you have these great people work themselves into great positions, and then how do you get them to leave the great positions to go do something that is, especially people that love going to fires, right? Like to take a position from, going in to now having to do paperwork or something like that. It's a hard transition, I think. I can't imagine.
Well, we saw it with a friend of mine, another friend of mine, who's the captain of a rescue company too. And he turned it down. And I understand it. There's an economic cost as well. Part of the problem is captains and lieutenants make overtime. Chiefs don't. So you have captains who are making $100,000 more than battalion chiefs.
Oh.
If you are a senior captain, especially a senior captain in a special operations company, you're making more than a battalion chief by far. So for those guys to take a test, it doesn't pay. And that's a problem with the city structure. The city needs to do something about that,
How did your expectation of being a chief differ from the realities of the job?
Well, early on, it didn't. I'd gotten promoted in '99. I went all over the city, and that's just routine. They move you as needed until you get a permanent assignment. And I covered for about a year and a half, and then ended up in the 16th Battalion in Harlem, a great firehouse with great fire companies. Going to a good number of fires, but not doing a lot of runs, which was fantastic. Only call me if it's important. I like that part. But I thought that that's what life was going to be like, and I had planned to spend the rest of my career there. At that point in '99, I would have been 47. So our mandatory retirement is 65. So, I didn't get assigned there right away, but I had almost 14 years of a career left ahead of me, I thought. So I planned to spend the next 14 years as battalion chief in the 16th Battalion. But then September 11th happened, and that changed all those plans.
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Out of the Special Operations Command, 9 battalion chiefs assigned to the Special Operations Command. 7 of them were killed that morning.
Wow.
So we ended up having to reach deep into our bench and start putting people into positions. So now I ended up going from, like I said, battalion chief doing 24 on and 72 off to a Monday to Friday and Saturday and Sunday, 14-hour-a-day job for the first few years, trying to rebuild, and plus going to, I was assigned on third alarms or greater in every special operations event in the city. So that really was an entirely different life. I didn't plan on that, but you step up and do what's got to do.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about your experience in 9/11. How did you come to be in that role, managing search and rescue post 9/11?
Well, I just explained, this big vacancy. Mm-hmm. And it turned out I had been on vacation. That was my first day of vacation, September 11th. Wow. So I was home and responded in on what we called the recall. They said every available firefighter report to your command. But on the way in, I had heard that both towers had collapsed already. So I just diverted, instead of going to my firehouse up in Harlem. This is a collapse rescue operation. I had been training for collapse rescue. I had taught collapse rescue for years. So I reported down to the command post at the scene. And while I was there, initially I was given routine firefighting assignments, try and save this building, one of the largest telephone switching center in Lower Manhattan. But when I came out, now we're, starting to try to put together a collapse rescue plan. We're finding, buried firefighters and removing them. And when I came out, I met one of the assistant chiefs, and he asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm here at your orders. Tell me what you need." He says, "Well, when are you due back to work at your firehouse?" I says, "Not for another 3 weeks. I'm, on vacation." He says, "Okay, consider yourself assigned here for the duration of the event." And that was just initially, I didn't know what I'd be doing. We started looking for strategic things to do. We got to find a command post location out of the weather, a more permanent location than a command board or in a vehicle. We needed a lot more room. So they said, "Okay, go find us a place to set up." And looked at that. The next thing we know, they had a reorganization meeting. I think it was Thursday morning, the 13th. And we're starting to get a handle on who's missing, They've been checking for, has anybody seen Ray Downey, for example? Has anybody seen Chief Barber? Has anybody seen this guy? And now we've got like a slate of empty names. Okay, we needed, a new chief of operations. We need a new chief of department. We need a new chief of special operations. So they just started plugging in names. And I had, at that point, like I said, had been a fireman, a lieutenant, and a captain in our rescue companies. I was also a firefighter in our hazmat company. So I had a pretty broad special operations background. So they said, well, okay, you got special operations, until we find Ray Downey. And, we never found Ray. So.
Wow. When you first responded, you say by the time you got there, the towers had collapsed. Like, I with ground zero being the way that it was, what were the surrounding areas around? Were you dealing with like tons of structure fires in the surrounding buildings and stuff like that? What was the surrounding events like?
Yeah, we had a lot of, exposures on fire. The most famous was probably 90 West Street, which was a 24-story apartment/office building. It had some residential occupancies in it. What was built back in 1908, I believe, and it was on fire. It was a building that was being renovated. The exterior was being renovated, so the entire exterior was covered in pipe and plank scaffold for guys working on the outside, and it's on fire. It had been evacuated prior to the collapse of the South Tower, which struck it, and that's what ignited the fires in it. So that burned for about 24 hours, and it was threatening to spread to other adjoining high rises. So it looked like lower Manhattan. We might lose lower Manhattan. There's no water because a 20-inch water main that supplied that area was sheared by pieces of the structural steel penetrating it. Wow. So we're having to get water from fireboats, relaying from distant hydrants. It took quite a while to get a good water supply established. They're utilizing water from standpipes from the buildings, water tanks on the buildings. And when they run out, we're done. So I was placed in command of 140 West Street, which is on the north side. And it too had been struck by the North Tower when it collapsed. And when you're in there, I've got, I don't know, maybe a dozen companies searching the upper floors. And I knew it was a telephone switching center, and I anticipated another fire like the one that we had in 1979 at another different telephone company switching center that burned for days and sent hundreds of guys to the hospital and killed half of them with cancer years later. It's a world famous fire in the New York Fire Department, the telephone company fire of 79. And that's what I expected to find there. And luckily, technology had advanced so much that they didn't have the rows and rows of cable trays with the polyurethane insulation. They had advanced to micro switches. So a lot of the upper floors were actually almost vacant. But we went in there and, we're trying to stop extension into the building from the burning debris in the streets around us. And command called and said, can you see number 7 World Trade from your location? So I go over and look out the east-facing windows, and it's right there. And what do you think about it? I said, well, I see a ton of fire. There's a lot of fire in that building. I don't see any sign of extinguishment. Now we pulled everybody out of there because it has no water. They tried to fight those fires and there's no water. Do you think it's going to fall down? And I looked, and when the smoke lifted due to wind shifts, I could see the entire southeast corner, about 40 feet deep, was missing, sheared away for about 15 floors. Just when the North Tower collapsed, it just took this huge cut out of that building. So I said, it don't look good. So that was one of the things that contributed to command saying, you know what, get everybody out of 7. We're not fighting that building. And now they tell me, pull all my people back from the building I'm in, because that's a 50-story building. If it comes down, it might land and crush the building we're in. And so we actually ended up tying off hose lines out through windows and letting them run and flow. And then we backed out of there.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was, things that you'd never think you'd see.
So one thing I've also never heard about is like all these resources converge on ground zero, but there's still an entire New York City that exists. How did that occur? Did all fire operations and EMS operations just kind of cease for the rest of the city at that point, or how did that continue?
No, of course not. We at one point, I believe about 65% of the New York City fire apparatus was committed to the World Trade Center. We had a pretty large reserve apparatus fleet. The people who were recalled reported to their firehouses. They staffed the reserve apparatus. So they put numerous, I believe the reserve fleet at that time was 20 engines and 10 ladders. Some of them ended up going to the World Trade Center, but we had probably 50 or 60 engines left in place. They were staffed with double and triple crews, because if the unit wasn't called to the World Trade Center, they had their on-duty crew, and now they get these off-duty guys. Every off-duty guy in the New York City Fire Department reported for duty, every single one. I had a captain, Dennis Murphy, who was on crutches with a broken leg from an explosion at the Father's Day fire in June. Dennis Murphy comes into the World Trade Center and reports for duty. I mean, being on crutches didn't stop anybody. Every one of them came in. Wow. So now you have a lot of manpower. We ended up activating mutual aid from surrounding departments. My department in Inwood sent an engine company in. They report in, get at least not a driver, but a firefighter from the neighborhood to ride with them to tell them where to go. And they responded as part of task forces throughout the city. New Jersey sent departments, upstate New York sent departments, Long Island sent fire departments. So we had engines and we had tons and tons of firefighters. It wasn't without problems. Most of the volunteer departments, all the departments in the surrounding neighborhood, they didn't all have New York City hose thread. New York City has its own hose thread. And the biggest problem was actually with standpipe and sprinkler systems. In almost the entire rest of the country, every standpipe Siamese or sprinkler Siamese has a 2.5-inch hose inlet. New York City has 3-inch hose threads for the inlets. So they had to make sure that there was at least one New York City engine company assigned. They might have 2 or 3 other agency engines assigned, but you had to have one New York City engine assigned so you could pump into the Siamese connections.
How long did the department function like that before there was any semblance of like normalcy again?
Jake, I can't really tell you. I was so involved.
Yeah, I can't.
I didn't leave the World Trade Center site, to go to a firehouse for weeks afterwards. Mm-hmm. I stayed there and reported directly to the Trade Center until the end of October.
Wow. Wow. So
I know it was several days, at least maybe weeks afterwards.
Wow. So what did your time at Ground Zero teach you about the fire service in general, command, functioning as an officer? What did you learn from it in retrospect?
Never, ever think you know enough to do your job. There's always going to be something new, something different that you don't know about. And you're going to have, a steep learning curve. And the preparation you do beforehand is just the foundation. You have to learn to be adaptable, to be innovative, to be able to pick up somewhere that you never anticipated being. The respect for the people. You give firefighters a task, they're going to get it done. It might take them a long, long time. Might not be the best way to do things because they've never done it before, but they'll get it done.
Mm-hmm. So as we kind of look to wrap, I want to talk to you about this. If you could look now, looking back after 50 years in the fire service, and talk to yourself starting out, what would the advice you'd want to give yourself about handling a career in the fire service in retrospect?
Enjoy every second of it. Every bit of it is a great thing. What we do for mankind is, second to none. And at some point, you're not going to be doing it anymore. So soak it up, absorb it, and enjoy it, because when it's over, you're going to look back and say, damn, I wish I could do that again.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So before I let you go, let the people know where they can find you, where they can see you speak, any books you have out that you'd like to push them to.
Well, I am on Instagram. I used to do a daily post. I've kind of slowed down. I had an incident back in July. We got hit by a tornado, and it took me offline for about a week, which broke my Instagram habit. But I'm online, www.chiefnorman.com, and on Instagram at chiefnormanfdny. So those are two places.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put
get
those
in touch with me. Yeah. Get in touch with me at either one of those. I get back to everybody. It may take me, a couple of days, depending on where I am and what I'm doing. And if you have a question, problem, comment, let me know, and I will get back to you. I am teaching still. I do. Next few months, I'll be doing an upcoming series on leadership for the New York State Association of Fire Chiefs up in actually tomorrow. I leave for the Capital District, and then I'll be out in central New York near Rochester, and then out in Buffalo. And I do the FDIC in Indianapolis, and I'm available for teaching. So.
Awesome. Well, truly, thank you for joining me, talking. It's an honor to be able to pick your brain about things. And just thank you for what you've committed to the fire service over your career. It's people like you that inspire the next generation to care about the job. So I appreciate that.
That's what got me motivated. All those great people who mentored me. Let me make one plug. You mentioned the first book, Fire Officer's Handbook of Tactics. That's used in a lot of departments as a fire ground tactics book. I have two other books though. Fire Department Special Operations, talking about building collapses and all those disciplines. And my latest it's called Working with Giants. It's a tribute to the people who got me where I am, and just a kind of memoir of my career, talking about the events that I did participate in and those who taught me how to do it.
Wow. Awesome. Once again, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. Truly.
All right, Jake. Thank you, sir. Keep up the great work.